Hey everybody, happy Friday and welcome back to Business Salad for our St. Paddy's special. Thanks so much for joining us for lunch.
That's right. We're your hosts, Steph and Katie, and we are excited to be here with Hazel Alvarado, owner and founder of Whiskey With Me, LLC. Oh my gosh, we're so excited about this. I can't wait to learn. And Steph, what are you drinking over there? Tell us what's happening.
Oh, this is actually, in the spirit of the show, a Grasshopper Martini, which I just love how festive it looks in, obviously, a non-traditional martini glass because my stuff is all crazy in my house. But this it's actually really low alcohol by its base ingredients. It's 3/4 of an ounce creme de menthe, 3/4 of an ounce white cream de cacao, and then 3/4 of an ounce half and half with chocolate shavings for garnish. Obviously, you shake that with ice. I personally prefer my drinks with a little bit more of a kick, so I did add the Bushmill single malt 10 that you see in the background back here.
Oh, nice. I see
but
that.
It's delicious. Guys, it basically tastes like a liquid Girl Scout cookie, like the mint. It's so good. Well, Hazel, listen, thank you so much for joining us today. We're really happy
Thank
to have
you.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I really love it. So.
And I love how festive everybody is today. Well, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your whiskey background?
Okay. Yeah. So, unlike many people, I actually pivoted from a corporate background of finance and technology into whiskey. And in terms of Irish whiskey, my very first one that I had was actually a Middleton Very Rare. That was actually the first time that I drank whiskey. I'm sure people in corporate America and small business knows that whiskey brings people together. However, I am a super geek. So I had a background in events, which is where Whiskey With Me comes from. However, as I was starting upon that journey, I did actually run into a bartender as part of the United States Bartenders Guild, and he had a bartender podcast. And so I actually learned a lot from there. I have worked both what they consider industry events as well as consumer events in terms of whiskey. And currently, besides the content for that, I also do writing for the Whiskey Network. I do the Women in Whiskey column, as well as if you're on the Clubhouse app, I co-admin the Whiskey Talks club there. And we have like weekly whiskey chats. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell, but I do happen to have an affinity specifically for Irish whiskey.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm going to have to check out that Clubhouse room because that sounds amazing. And I had no idea about that. And I love the Women in Whiskey.
Oh yeah. No, definitely. So I was going to say, actually, I didn't know if maybe what we might want to start with. I think the basic question is when people think of Irish whiskey, the first thing they probably think of is Jameson and maybe shots, which is fine. You know, there's no shame in that. You know, I am not a fan of any sort of like whiskey shaming. However, there is an entire category of Irish whiskey that's out there. And part of my own personal thing is to make certain people know that Irish whiskey is in itself a category and that there are other brands outside of Jameson.
Right.
So here's like a weird little known fact, I guess to the general public. Most people, when they think of whiskey, they think of like maybe Scotch or bourbon. Irish whiskey, however, happens to be a category that kind of sits in the middle, like so to speak. And part of the reason it does that is because of the fact that it is not as well known, which, believe it or not, actually comes from history. So Irish whiskey was actually the first whiskey, sorry people, before there was Scotch. And it all starts with the monks because I feel like it's always the monks, right? That's kind of like the story behind it. So there were monks that were actually distilling perfume, and they came back to Ireland. And that specific distillation was something that they used that methodology for in order to actually create whiskey. So the thing with the whiskey is when they decided to sit there and create like the what's known right now as I'm going to mispronounce this Ushkabe. There is actually a clan clan leader. I forget like his name, but if you go to Dublin and you go to the library there's actually some annals where they actually talk about a specific clan leader that apparently passed from aqua vitae, which is I guess like the water of life, so to speak. So the water of life actually got changed into Ishka Bay. It's spelled like a weird way, which then got bastardized into Uska whiskey until like whiskey. So that's really like 1405 is when you first see that. And at the time, of course, there's a kind of a funny saying that the only thing the Irish don't like more about the British is their taxes. So at that point, they were just being like kind of taxed left and right. So there were taxes on the size of like what was actually the containers and the stills. And then there was actually the spirit produced. But what makes Irish whiskey different is if you've heard of the term pot still, like a single pot still, it actually comes from specifically that's uniquely Ireland. A lot of people think that the triple distillation is required for Irish whiskey because it's something that's so common, but ironically enough, it is not something that's actually legally required. It's something that, yes, it's something that's common in practice. Like, so that's not something that's actually set into law. So what happened was in 1785, there was a malt tax because, the British like to tax. So what the distillers did at that point, instead of using malted barley, since they were being taxed on malted barley, they started to use a combination of unmalted barley. So there was a combination of malted and then unmalted barley. So actually at that time, like in the 1700s, 1779, believe it or not, there was over 1,000 distilleries at that point. But then history happens, things start to happen, and unfortunately it started to come down. So here's some things that a couple of people don't know. One, I think people realize that they know the term coffee still. So the Aeneas coffee still is something that's actually referred to either in Scotch or if you know, for example, Japanese whiskey, Nika grain. Aeneas coffee was actually Irish. So most whiskey at that point were in the copper pot stills, but he created a design to make whiskey, the production of whiskey, for it to be able to produce much faster, more like an automation. But there was actually a backlash against it, and they didn't feel like it was truly Irish whiskey. So I will not give you I will not give you the horrible details behind it. But essentially what happened with that is because they decided, the Irish distillers decided not to use, Scotland picked it up. They were able to start to produce more whiskey. And another small thing that people don't know is that in 1838, Father Matthew actually enacted the Cork Total Abstinence Society. And there were about 3 million people that were a part of it. So at that, 20 distilleries actually closed down during that year, believe it or not. Then history kind of goes, oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, yes, no, sorry about that. I thought I had that off. But then you have the potato famine hitting, and then history kind of takes over. You've got the First World War, you've got Easter Rising, you've got the War of Independence, the Civil War, the Irish independence, and then on top of that, the Volstead Act. Right. And that's kind of like actually somewhat of a turning point, because what ends up happening is this is where Scotch starts to take over because of the prohibition. There's a famous story that Joe Kennedy, who was the father of JFK, reached out to Jameson and Powers in order to get their whiskey for post-prohibition orders, but they decided not to fulfill those orders. And what ended up happening is the Scotch whiskey started coming through. So you actually had not only Scotch whiskey coming through, but then you had people, because prior to that, Irish whiskey was actually well regarded. You had people making fake Irish whiskey. So you didn't even know what was in that Irish whiskey, and they were just putting Irish names on it. So then by the time that Prohibition ended, and it came out, people were already kind of drinking Scotch at that point. Irish whiskey had a bad reputation. Second World War happens, and you have people basically coming home from the war that are drinking blended Scotch. So unfortunately, that's the point where Irish whiskey kind of takes a fall and like loses its crown, so to speak. So that's something that, that's something that kind of that I feel like that we've generally been coming back from, because then, you know, the 1950s, 1960s, 70s kind of hits. But then there was somewhat of a revival that happens that's starting like in the 1950s and 1980s. And now there's, I believe it was 38 working distilleries as of 2019, 2020. So people are starting now to kind of discover what the Irish whiskey style is. So compared to, I'm sure you guys, you said you're familiar with bourbon or you're familiar with Scotch. Irish whiskey is either, usually there's a pot still, which is made from a mash of 30% malted barley, minimum 30% unmalted barley with other 5% of other cereals added and distilled in the pot stills. Single pot still, similar to Scotch. A lot of people don't realize that single designation just means it comes from a single distillery. It does not mean like actual single pot. There was actually a pure pot still label. So if you actually see any bottles that say pure pot still, that label stopped at 2011. That's kind of considered a vintage. So grab that one. So you've got, yeah. So you've got the pot still. Then you've got the grain, like the single grain. And then you've also got like the blended as well, which is like a blend of two or more of styles. So I feel like what's happening is a lot of people don't realize that there's like all those different categories that are happening. They're mostly familiar like with the blended. They're not familiar that the fact that there's, you know, the single malt that actually does happen with Ireland, or like the single as well.
Got it. Okay. Wow, that was an incredible history, Hazel.
Yes. Sorry, I'm like trying to stop myself from totally geeking out.
No, awesome. I feel like, we are learning so much, and I feel like you really know this. And you know, Hazel, obviously, I mean, you have this passion and you like have this knowledge, and it's so clear. I mean, you love whiskey, but what is it about Irish whiskey that makes you love it really the most? Like any special stories, or is there like any certain reason for that?
So it's two things actually. One, my background, my corporate background is actually financial regulatory compliance, which is why, like, you know, if there was like a weird Jeopardy category of whiskey regulations, then I could probably like win that one hands down. So one, it's, you know, when I started like first drinking whiskey, like in general, it was just, you know, kind of a drinking, but then I just started learning about the different like distillation methods and whatnot. And the fact that Irish whiskey has that unique pot still. It is actually unique to Ireland. That kind of had somewhat of a charm for me for that. But I also happened to, I've been to Scotland and I've been to Ireland. I've been to Kentucky. And maybe it was because I went to Ireland first. But when I went to Ireland, I had it was such an amazing time, and the people were so beautiful. I would never do this in New York. I'm a New Yorker. I'm here from New York City. But my friend that I was staying with in Dublin said to me, you know, I have to work over the weekends, but I know you said you wanted to go to a music festival. Because I said, I hear you guys have these great music festivals. And she said, yeah, this is what's going to happen. Pack your bags for the weekend. You're going to have to get on a train, and someone take it all the way from Dublin to Sligo. Someone will pick you up and you'll have a fun time. Now, if I was here and I was in New York and you said, I'm going to pop you onto the train, and I would have been like, no, that's not happening. But I did it. I went to Sligo. I did have somebody pick me up, and I ended up in Ballyshannon, which is a place where they have something called the Rory Gallagher Festival. Now, prior to this, I'd never heard of Rory Gallagher. The claim to fame is that when Jimi Hendrix was asked, what does it feel like to be the best guitarist in the world? He apparently turned and said, well, I don't know, ask Rory Gallagher. So It was just, you know, it was just like I think that's probably, that's like number one, like in terms of Irish whiskey. I just had an amazing time. In fact, like the first bar I went into, most of the pubs there don't actually serve food. I remember saying to them, you know, I'm going to go get some food. Someone just literally went across the street, brought me back a dinner plate from his wife. And as you can see, like on my Facebook, my first name is actually Hazel Joyce. So when they carded me, they were saying to me, okay, so your name is Hazel Joyce, like you're Irish. And I'm like, no, I'm not really. Okay, yes, I guess I'm Irish. I guess. But it's that. But also from if you're going to go the geeky technical route, and then I know we're going to get to that. As bourbon lovers, I'm sure you know that it's pretty often that I'm going to just put this out there. Not every category is the same. I always kind of hate when people do that, but. That being said, you can usually say, you know, Scotch will go with this or bourbon will go with that. The nature of Irish whiskey, however, of what I happen to like about it is, as someone that loves food and drink, Irish whiskey is something that I can actually have prior to my meal. Like I can have it as the pregame. I can have it during the meal, or I can also have it after the meal. Usually, like for me, with bourbon or Scotch, it's not something that I can drink like all the way straight through. It's kind of funny because I feel like most people think of it as like a shot whiskey, but not all the styles. But I feel like generally it's something that's that you can pair with a lot of things, but it's also a very approachable whiskey. I happen to know that there are a lot of people out there that they think all Scotches are peated, or they think all bourbon has the burn. So I feel like this is kind of like a good, like in between. At some point, everyone can kind of taste like an Irish whiskey like category. So
find something that they like. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, I love that. I love that reason for you. I love those two dichotomies there between that sort of story and experience, and then also just your understanding of the actual liquor and how that works. You know, I'm not a big drinker. I do drink, but not often. And so I'm obviously drinking a little energy, what is this here? A little green drink here. One of the things that I say, it's for the color. It's for the color.
Yes.
Yeah. One of the things I'll say is that a lot of people, if they are either buying a gift for someone and they're maybe not yet have really experienced much with the Irish whiskey, or maybe someone that's like, maybe I want to try Irish whiskey. Do you have any sort of entry level, or like, you know, maybe recommendations for someone who's maybe first kind of wanting to get into it?
Yes. So I have both of them here. Again, Jameson is fine. You can also get a Jameson Black Barrel, which is a little bit of a step up. But I feel like the two is first it's a Tullamore Dew. So this one, I love this one. It's the two-part story. It's something that's accessible and also something that you can use in different things. And so when I say different things, a pour, there is actually something that I do. If you know the Espresso Martini, I like an Espresso Martini with an Irish twist. So I sub out the vodka. I've had people that are wine drinkers and not whiskey drinkers actually taste this, but also taste in the Espresso Martini. So they love that. But Tullamore Dew, I know because of the fact that I think about 10 years ago, I do a lot of volunteering. They were the title sponsor for a FDNY event for a children's burn camp. So that's actually how I got introduced to the Tullamore Dew. And it's usually, now I'm in Manhattan, so this costs like $36, but I feel like it's around probably like $25, $30 like in the rest of the country. So that would be the first one that I would recommend to people. Another one that I like is the Slainte Irish whiskey. I mean, this is like the triple cask. And what I actually also love about Slainte is there's a history behind the castle at Slainte. There's a whole history behind their connection like to music. And I won't go into the details, but the Whiskey Network that I work for, we actually spoke to Alex, who is like the founder for that. So that's like a link I can share, because one of the other great things is if you ever talk to any of the distillers from Ireland, they have like the best stories. They're just like the best people to talk to. But I will say, because I have to do this, my go-to, which is more of like, a $60, is the Redbreast 12. Yeah. I mean, there's that. For people that are bourbon drinkers, I would go with either, the Redbreast 12 cask strength. So that's like a little bit more full-bodied. But sorry, I know, and I promise I will stop.
You're good. Go for it. Because the next question is going to be, I was going to tell you, I'm obviously, I'm a bourbon drinker. So what would be a bottle for somebody who is a little more familiar with the whiskeys? So you hit that with that one. And then, or maybe if you've got somebody who is, an Irish whiskey drinker, but they're looking to try something maybe a little different, a little out of the box. So I love it. Keep going.
Oh, yeah, no. So, so for that, you can actually do a little bit of a step up in terms of Redbreast. Like I said, you can do the cask strength, or you can do something with the Lustau, which is sherry, actually. So I happen to be a huge sherry fan. Like, yes, this is the Muscatel, but you get the point with that one. But in terms of like maybe a little something more different, is there's the Glendalough, this one, the double barrel, as well as I love this one too, Writer's Tears. I don't know if you guys can. I feel like I have like light. Yeah. There's this. There's also, I unfortunately do not have any of the bottles here. There is also Teeling, which is really great because they have a couple of different expressions. So the other thing is too is it's not a one-trick pony with a lot of these distillers. They do like have a range in terms of whether they have a pot or like a single malt or a blend. So Teeling has one. I famously do not like peat. I'm going to geek out for 2 seconds. I love smoke. I do not like peat. They are actually not the same thing. Correct. Teeling just came out with actually a peated version, which is the Irish peat. I think it's 15 ppm. And that was actually really great because it had the smoke. Now, there were some people, I think, that felt like they could taste the peat. But for me, as a non-peat person, I thought that was great. And I had them throw it into an old-fashioned for me. So that actually went really well with it. And then the other, I was going to say also Dead Rabbit, which as you can tell, actually I finished. So
that's soldier there.
The other two I was going to say, if you kind of also want to step up, is there's the Tyrconnell single malt. So I have sorry, I feel like I'm killing you with the bottles.
No, that's
Tyrconnell single malt.
Got it.
And they have different finishes, Madeira, port casks, as well as, I know someone, I just realized this what they call them, the spots. Like green spot. The newest ones are actually like red spot and blue spot. I feel like I'm missing something else. The only other one that I am going to mention, because I love it, but is not available in the US, but I will mention anyway, is Method and Madness.
Okay. Yeah. And that's not available here in the US. Okay, got it.
No, I had somebody bring that back to me. But I was going to say, and I just realized my little fun thing just fell there. I mentioned like the whole clubhouse thing. So we are actually going to feature a whole bunch of distillers. Let's see, I think, we're like over time, right? I feel like
you're fine. Keep going. We're good.
Okay. All right. So, I'm just going to read off of this because I felt like I was going to forget somebody. So we actually have something on, if you're on Clubhouse, it's Whiskey Chats. Just look for Hazel Alvarado. Monday, March 15th, we're going to start the room at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with my co-mods, Jazz, Jordan, Greg, Sam, and Drew. We're going to have Sergio Floridas, who is the founder and editor of Irish Whiskey Magazine. And we're going to feature, hopefully, Tullamore Dew, Gillian Murphy, Writer's Tears, Rose Robinson, that's their tentative but confirmed, our Jody McLaughlin for Teeling, Alex Sebalt from West Cork, Jamie Cotter from Hinch, and Donald, I'm so going to butcher this, Donald O'Gallagher from Glendalough. But for the St. Paddy's Day, we're opening the room at 5 p.m. Louise McRain, who is from JJ Corey, she is the founder and owner. She is going to open the room. Danielle Solano, who works for Pernod Ricard, is going to cover Middleton, Redbreast, Blue Spot. Dorothy O'Connell is going to cover D.W. O'Connell. We have Dave Cummings from Dingle, Stephanie Shen covering Dead Rabbit, Dubliner, Liberties, Liam Brogan, Two Stacks Irish Whiskey, Brendan Cardy, Killowen Distillery, The Liberator, Maurice O'Connell, and Jordan, who is going to cover Ballyhoo. I'm trying to get William Lavelle from the Irish Whiskey Association, but he hasn't answered me yet.
You better
So I am
answer.
going to say, also, if you also want to learn, this is actually one of my favorite books.
Ooh.
It's called the Whiskies of Ireland by Peter Morayan. But there is a newer book out from the guys that own Dead Rabbit. So that's Jack McGarry, Sean Muldoon, and Tim Herlihy. Like it's called Barley to Blarney.
Cool.
There's
I missed the Blarney Stone.
Oh yeah. No, I mean that's the Dead Rabbit is like one of those crazy things where you walk in and there's so many whiskeys out there. So and it's like with some of the whiskeys like you've never heard of, and it's just like an amazing thing. So I would say the other two things, and then I will stop geeking out. Sorry. There's for general whiskey, because since you guys are bourbon, I know this is Irish. There's this book called The Complete Whiskey Course. No one is paying me to say any of this, just to say, you know, I'm not affiliated with any of this. By Robin Robinson, which is, if you are super geeky like me, that's definitely something that you want. And he goes into like not just the Irish whiskeys, but bourbon and Scotch. I don't have it because ironically I gifted all of them away, but there is one, The Beginner's Guide to Whiskey by Sam Nash Green. And for Women's History Month, I'm just going to mention this one, Whiskey Women by Fred Minnick.
I love that.
Yeah, I was going to say the only thing is too, like maybe if you have people like for like home bartenders, it was actually mentioned in this book, Cocktails Made Simple. It's like a small little. I feel like there's so many books out there and there's so many beautiful whatever, but sometimes people I know just want something simple and quick, and you know, just open it up. Like, you know, it literally actually has these pictures where when they show it to you, you actually see like what it is. So
yeah, you're right. That's great for those home bartenders, especially, you know, if, you know, people have their holiday parties next week or whatever the case may be. And I love food. I know you mentioned that too, Hazel. So, and whiskey and food generally is, you know, a pretty big deal to some people. So let's talk about those food pairings for people's St. Patty's Day holiday parties. What do you recommend maybe they pair together for those gatherings?
Okay. So one of the great things that I mentioned earlier about Irish whiskey is if they do go traditional, if they go, you know, the full Irish breakfast, if they do the corned beef and cabbage, like they're pretty much all going to go together. But in terms of more of like the entry level ones, if you want something lighter, like you want to do maybe like a salmon or like a fish or like a light pasta, that's something that can take it. But going back to what you said about the bourbon, if you go more towards some of like the single malts, there's actually a peated Connemara or something like a little bit more peated. You can actually pair that with something with more like fried foods and like, you know, bourbon. If you want to go the full Irish route, you can do, I brought this. This is actually from my fridge, so let's see if I can do this correctly. I have like little Irish soda bread. I do have the Kerrygold butter.
Of course.
The first time someone told me to buy this butter, I thought they were crazy, but it is actually really good butter. And if you want to do like a fun, easy pairing and not like, actually Kerrygold has these, which are the 3 cheeses. So it's Irish cheeses. It's like from sweet to savory. It's got the Skellig, the Blarney Castle, and the Dubliner. Now, I was able to find these here. I don't know if they are available like everywhere. But also in terms of a dessert note. So to go back to the actual food pairings, in terms of the more entry level kind of whiskeys, that's the ones where you compare with something like a little bit lighter. But as you start to go more of like the cask strength and more of the full bodied, that's when you start to go with like more of the heavier foods. If you want to do the desserts and you want to just do pairings, now it doesn't have to be this. I like to do the chocolate. I just have to put orange. So that's me with that, and the dark chocolate. And I know this is Irish whiskey, but I have a soft spot for the Walkers, you know, those dogs, you know, when we're doing that. But the thing that's also kind of nice, if you look for some of the whiskeys, especially with the finishes that have anything with the sherry, the port, the Madeira, anything like, you know, chocolatey, that's something that you can do. I don't know if a lot of people look at what, you know, they don't realize that there's a lot of Irish whiskey that's finished out there. There's also I'm going to throw out there, sorry, and it's all over the place. There's Tullamore Dew actually does a Caribbean cask finish, which is also like a rum. And I point these things out because if someone's not coming from that kind of a background, if you're coming more from maybe like a wine background or a rum background, the finish on it actually will help you figure out like what you personally would like in terms of pairings. The last thing I would say in terms of learning, I would say the best thing besides reading is talking to people, especially like with COVID. I know that I met you through the I Drink and I Know Things group. If you're on Facebook, I assume maybe somebody is. There are also like multiple other groups. I know there's there's actually the Irish Whiskey group. I'm part of Whiskey, Bourbon, Scotch Enthusiasts, which is like 43,000 members strong. I mean, I guess that's like, you feel like it, that you learn a lot there. There's also Women in Whiskey. One of the nice things about COVID is local groups open their groups out. Now, so for example, I'm a Manhattan Whiskey Club person because I live in Manhattan, but I got invited to the Los Angeles Bourbon and Whiskey Society, Winnipeg, Monmouth, and it's just so great to have like this cross collaboration in terms of group and people like just sharing their whiskey. So yeah, but believe it or not, a lot of the learning came from that. And I do know, I guess to throw out a technical note, people always get concerned that they don't understand tasting notes and things like that. You can just like literally sit down and figure it out in terms of like what you like to eat. You can make your own, like if you take spices, one of the things that we talk about with the Irish whiskey and then the use of unmalted barley is from my own cabinet. If you just take things like out of your own pantry and then you just open it up and like smell it, that's actually something to help you train your palate. So the last geeky thing, sorry, I know I feel like we're going over, is usually it's the Grand Carn, which is this glass. You know, if you want to be like fancy, you've got the nosing glass. But for Irish whiskey, and again, I hope I don't mispronounce this, there's the Tua.
Okay.
Glass. The nose is the mouth, I should say, is like actually a little wider. So there's actually, and then the base is, I don't know if you can see it here, is like that. From my understanding, it's more stability and also it will like roll less. So I think when people are doing their tastings, they like, first of all, you don't have to be the person that sees like every notes. Sometimes I actually, if I taste, I like to taste without reading the notes because somebody says like banana, and then I'm thinking, oh yeah, I can taste banana. It's really kind of like there's no wrong way to come up like with the notes. If you come up with like cherries, raisins, bubble gum, whatever, that's really like what you're tasting. I would say the only thing I would tell people is, one, do try to make sure you open your mouth a little, otherwise you just get that spot, pretty much the alcohol. And two, don't be afraid to put a little bit of water in it, just a little. Generally that is more like a bourbon scotch, but you can also do it with like Irish whiskeys as well. So I feel like I just geeked out, like way geeked out.
That's perfect. I love it. I think that's great, Hazel. And that was a lot of great information, especially there at the end for people who are maybe looking to get into it. And I agree with you about adding, a drop or two of water. That's definitely a very familiar action in the bourbon community. And Katie and I were just talking before we launched the show about the nose notes and the palate notes of the bourbon and how you can get so much with that. So it's great to know that, because even I am not that familiar with Irish whiskey. So now I'm really interested to sit down with a lot of the different bottles and kind of figure out those different notes in there. So
it's a lot of practice. Like some of the distillers, I mean, I know that I think, what was it? It might have been for Chile. They were saying there's 200 to 300 like tasting notes. So I think you and I were talking about this, where we were doing this thing about like the most unhelpful tasting notes. Like there's a lot of smooth. I used to joke about like I would see marzipan, and a lot of people didn't know what marzipan was. So I just want to put out there, there's no really wrong way to taste it. If you can't taste it, if it really just like it's alcohol or it's, I just happen to love food and wine and things. So I will have things like, butterscotch or, specific types of crackers and things like that. I think the last thing I'm going to throw in, which very briefly, because I don't know if your audience is, I do smoke cigars. So the other thing about that I thought was interesting was I initially thought when I was doing my tasting the other day that it was just going to be a peated Irish, but it turned out they gave us the whole line. So another thing that's kind of nice, you don't see it a lot with the cigar pairings, but Irish whiskey is accessible in terms of very specifically with the pairings. So I'm using that as an analogy because I know that if I have a cigar that has a certain kind of body and it might be a little bit much for me, I will look specifically for an Irish whiskey that'll have like a sherry finish or a port finish to help cut it. So that's something to kind of keep in mind, where you could have anything from fancy food to, you know, pizza or Chinese takeout. You can think of it as something that will like either enhance or like cut it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that is great. And really, Hazel, thank you so much for your time today. All of the information you gave, this was fabulous. I'm really looking forward to connecting with you more, maybe on a slightly deeper level than what our general audience.
Yeah, I kind of, I'll be fair. I was like, I kind of feel like I get nervous on camera. So I'm like, I think I butchered going into because if you let me go into the categories, I will go into like the legal and then the makeup and then how the malting and fermenting works. And I'm like, no, calm down, Hazel, don't do that. Perfect. Let's get to this. So I did put a little bit of the Slainte triple cask in my little thing. And I'm sure you know this, the cheers for Ireland is Slainte. Slainte. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Well, tell everyone, Hazel, where they can find you on social for more of this great information.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So on Facebook, you know, besides just Hazel Joyce, you can go to Whiskey with Me. If for some bizarre reason you're on LinkedIn, there is a Whiskey with Me on LinkedIn. For Instagram, I'm Data and Drams. For Twitter, it's Vox Hazel, and for Clubhouse, it's Hazel Alvarado at the Whiskey Talks. Yeah, so thank you guys so much. Like what, just out of curiosity, so I see what's in your background there. What outside of like maybe the regular, like Jameson, have you guys tried, or what you like you have the Bushmills 10, right?
Yes, yep. I've also got the Black Bush back here, and then actually just yesterday we picked up this Quiet Man, which I'm really excited.
Yes. Thank you for that, because that is, I mean, there's so many Irish whiskeys out there, and I feel like they're not getting play, and I had that in my head on the list, but yeah, I just didn't want to miss the people that are coming next week.
Yes, I'm really, the reason we picked that up is a lot of people out there know that I'm a huge John Wayne fan, and The Quiet Man is one of my favorite movies. So that's kind of why I have that one there. Yep.
Yeah, but this one,
other than that, whiskey is pretty limited.
But this one, I don't know if you can say, part of the reason I love it, besides the fact that it's got the double, the bourbon Oloroso, is the story behind this is that he was a bishop that went, I guess, to live in the woods, in the caves, and then was praying one day and was in a lake, and a bird landed in his hand. So he decided to stand there until it gave birth. You know, like, and so it kind of looks. I remember looking at this and meeting the guy behind this. But that's the thing. There's such great stories like behind, like, you know, like the whiskeys and like where they're from and stuff like that. So
you two, I shouldn't even be in the room with either of you two. I told Steph coming in, I said, well, Jameson might be the end of my experience. So all of this is knowledge for people like me, Hazel. Okay. So
well, no, here's the thing that people don't realize. I will stop the geek after this. But there's really 3 main distilleries. I mean, there's other, but it's pretty much, you know, the Bushmills. There's Cooley and Middleton. Middleton happens to have. I don't want to insult anybody, but it's when I explain to people, they kind of understand it. So you know how the same company owns like Old Navy, The Gap, and Banana Republic. So think of it as like Middleton, Banana Republic, Red Vest 12, The Gap, and Jameson. Because and if you like Jameson, I'm sure you've done they have the expressions with the Black Barrel. I know they have also the brews. There's also a Jameson cold brew. Which has the coffee notes. I mean, I kind of feel remiss that I don't have it here, but I feel like everybody knows like Jameson.
Yeah.
The one, of course, that's the one that I know. Yes, exactly. We a few years ago we had a trip to Ireland, and I was pregnant, so there was not even anything going on for me but to experience it. But we went to the distillery there, but it was a great experience. Hazel, this is awesome. We really coming in. It was amazing. Steph, was there anything else? I love it.
I think that's everything. We just want to wish everybody a very safe and happy St. Patrick's Day. Be sure to tune in next Friday for more BS. And if you're looking for us on social, you can find us on Instagram at Biz Salad Show and on YouTube at Business Salad. And we will see everybody next week.
Okay, thank you guys so much. Slainte.